Hello, everybody. My name's Ken Willette. I serve as the Executive Director of the North American Fire Training Directors, who, in collaboration with Microsoft, is bringing this webinar to you today to address tools for success for dyslexic learners in the fire service. And I would like to share with you that the North American Fire Training Directors is a membership organization of the state and provincial level fire training authorities in the United States and Canada. We have 51 members. Annually, we are responsible for the training of over 900,000 firefighters. Our experience and the research tells us that a percentage of those individuals have dyslexia, both our students, our staff, and the leaders of our organization. Our interest is to ensure that every individual who encounters the North American Fire Training Directors in their training organizations have a successful experience and become safe in the delivery of fire and rescue services in their communities. Today's webinar is to bring this question forward, to share information, and to make folks aware of dyslexia and the impact, but more importantly, tools and resources to manage it. I'd like to introduce you to our panel that is appearing today. And next slide, please. And we will be talking about the impact of dyslexia, and our speakers today, Rachel Berger. And today we will be providing the information on the impact of dyslexia. And along with Rachel Berger and Burton Clark, who will be talking about that, we have Natalie Natalie Parkinson, who is the Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer for the Shropshire Fire and Rescue Service. Dr. Burton Clark, the Executive Fire Officer, American Fire Culture, researcher, author, and lecturer. And Rachel Berger, who is the Learning Disability and Assertive Tech and Microsoft Director, Decoding Dyslexia in Minnesota. We're being supported by Richard Zach of Microsoft, who is monitoring the chat and will be assisting with questions. Our speakers will share more about their background and their reason for being interested in the topic as they talk to you today. So at this time, I would like to welcome Dr. Burton Clark. So Dr. Clark.
Thanks, Ken. Welcome, everybody. We're delighted you're here. I'm Bert Clark. I've got some 50 years in the fire service. And last year, I came out publicly for the first time that I've been dyslexic my whole life. So thanks to all the people that gave me positive reinforcement about that. The North American Fire Training Directors was the first to reach out to me. Next thing you know, I called my buddies at Microsoft, and they said, yeah, we can help you out. And here we are. So this is the first attempt to bring this issue to light. And before you can change anything, you have to realize that there's an issue. So I'm delighted to be here. So with that, Rachel is going to join me, and we're going to kick this off by sharing our stories of our dyslexic experience. Good morning, Rachel.
Good morning, Burton. Good to be here with you today. So this is really exciting. Yeah, let's go ahead and kick things off with some of our personal experiences on navigating dyslexia, Burton. I found it really interesting to learn and share with you. And the thing that I find most interesting is that, you know, dyslexia is very equal opportunity. It knows no socioeconomic, ethnic, or racial boundaries, and equitably 17 to 20% of our population struggles with it. And while Burton and I both have different experiences, you're going to hear some similarities. So Burton, as dyslexics, you and I have navigated many settings with our dyslexia, most of which weren't designed in mind to be inclusive of dyslexics. And I would like to know, as we share with others, what was it like for you navigating education, and when did you learn you were dyslexic?
I think a dyslexic knows there's something different about them almost from the first time somebody reads them a book and they start that process. because without knowing it, I was very good at understanding and memorizing the story. But when it came to the text, I couldn't figure out what the words were. So my brain was not working to pick up words. Now, once you go to school, then you find out the people around you, well, they can recognize dog and cat and ball and run and all the Dick and Jane kind of stuff. But that was very challenging for me. I got more from looking at the pictures than trying to figure out the words were. So, and that continued throughout school. It got to a point where in third grade, my mother asked the school to hold me back. So I would repeat the third grade because I couldn't read. And the school told her, well, he's got the highest IQ in class. And she said, I don't care. He can't read. You're going to hold him back. So that was the first technical identification that something was wrong. Then mom was very sensitive to this. So she took me to all kinds of eye doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists. And I started taking summer classes, what we paid for, to help me. I don't know if it ever really did. By the time I got into the sixth grade, I was sent to remedial reading classes where they tried to teach phonics. Because when you're as old as I am, we were taught to sight read, which at the time was just terrible. If you don't know phonics, it's very difficult. So I struggled and finally was able to get out of eighth grade, got into high school. And luckily, I was in the business program. So my accounting classes, my business classes, and my woodshop classes, I got A's and B's in. The rest of them, I was lucky if I could pull a D out of it. So I did succeed through high school. But again, the challenge was always there. It wasn't until college that the program changed. So when I first went to college, there were no more spelling tests, no more reading out loud. Everything was typed up at home. Mom fixed my spelling errors and my grammar and stuff, turned it in. And all of a sudden, my first year in college, I was on the dean's list. I'd never had all A's and B's in my whole life, but the system changed. And that kind of carried out throughout my career, ultimately ending up 30 years later, getting my doctorate. And I would have never believed that in elementary school. So what were some of your experiences, Rachel?
Yeah, mine was a little bit different than yours, but no less, similarities. I did not struggle as much to learn to read, actually, nor have I ever struggled with spelling. I have a near photographic mind, and they've always thought that that is the reason why I didn't struggle so much with reading. I did have to, I was held back in first grade, but I can still to this day remember the photographs on the alphabet chart that was above the blackboard, and like the A had apple and the V had violin and the W was a big wind cloud with its cheeks really full to make that W or wind sound. So my reading wasn't difficult, nor was spelling. So to be honest, I didn't really struggle until I got to high school. And unlike my brothers, I was a little bit more crafty, or as my parents called it, belligerent. I wasn't outright misbehaving like my brothers. And this is really common of females with dyslexia. Oftentimes they can kind of fly under the radar and people will think, well, they're really bright, but they're just not applying themselves. They're just not trying very hard. And so oftentimes, what I would do in high school, Burton, was I might pick a debate, and why they didn't just tell me I should join debate club, I'm not sure, but I can recall when difficult activities came up, I would pick a debate with my teachers. For instance, language arts. I recall a debate on why I didn't need to journal in class, and my language arts teacher inviting me to go sit with the principal, and that resulting in a little bit of time off of school, which only hurt me. But and in addition to that, I can also recall, imagine this, Burton, I did not like public speaking. And so to get out of my speech classes, I can recall taking a book of passes because our office assistant, Adeline Sampson, had all of those passes pre-signed. And so if you had one of those passes, it was golden. So for me, what it looked like my struggles were really me being crafty at not having to put myself into the place of struggle. And I didn't actually find out solidly that I too struggled with dyslexia and dysgraphia until my now 15-year-old son was diagnosed at age 5. So I really didn't know, and unfortunately didn't have the supports when it came to high school, college, or even in the workplace early on. And just like you, that can pose some significant difficulties. My thing was, though, I just thought I was escaping everyone finding out that I wasn't very bright.
Yeah. The fire service was a real lifesaver to me, because when I entered it almost by accident, the fire service was not reading and writing oriented. It was a very hands-on psychomotor kind of stuff, which I was good at. And so I became very proficient at the tools, the equipment, driving, doing the things that firefighters do. And then when I went to the fire academy, I was able to use those same psychomotor training skills in the more cognitive kinds of things. Because at the fire academy, I was in charge of all the stuff that nobody wanted to take, meaning written and oral communications, group process and team building, organizational theory and practice, which were all basically cognitive and affective driven. But then we were able to figure out how to make that into exercises and behaviors. So we had the full spectrum of instructional modality. And the other big thing the Fire Academy did, we took away the fear of failure. All of our materials were competency-based, which meant the student was able to continue doing the learning and demonstrating their competency until they achieved the minimum passing score. So if a person if the person was dyslexic or had some kind of problem, we would give them support until they were able to achieve that level of competency. So this is not a natural extension of that work to now try to take those philosophies, if you will, into the bigger realm of not only the training environment, but also the work environment. So luckily, we have our next presenter here with us whenever we're ready.
So changing, the fire service is what changed your trajectory then?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. It was an environment that valued psychomotor skills much more than reading and writing skills. One of the examples I give is that every police rookie academy has writing as part of their curriculum, but very few, if any, firefighter rookie schools have writing as part of their curriculum. Well, until writing is put into that level of work, we're not saying that we value this just because we don't understand it and we don't utilize it.
Right. Yeah, there's so much to navigate as you move on from school to then workplace and navigating dyslexia. And there's a clear turning point that your trajectory changed. But in addition to that, for me, my trajectory changed when my 15-year-old was diagnosed.
Well, I got to remind you that we're 16 minutes into the show, and we do have some more of the programs to present.
Well, let's go ahead then and bring Natalie in.
All righty. So with that, we're going to move to Natalie Parkinson, who is the director of their program on dyslexia at the Shropshire Fire Rescue Service in Great Britain. They are an award-winning fire service. That's why I was able to find them, and they were nice enough to be part of this program. So with that, Natalie, it's all yours.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm going to give you some information around how we support our dyslexic employees at Shropshire Fire and Rescue Service. I'm the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Officer at Shropshire Fire, and I've been here for about 15 years, and I think we supported our very first employee with dyslexia about 14 years ago, so it was a real learning curve for us. But before I tell you about the things that we've done, I've just got a short video from our Chief Fire Officer, which we'd like to play for you.
Good afternoon. I'm Rod Hamilton, Chief Fire Officer of Shropshire Fire and Rescue Service. Firstly, may I say thank you for inviting Natalie and I to speak to you today, and what an honour it is to be able to share some of our experiences with the North American Fire Training Directors. To give you some context, I'm the Chief of one of the smaller standalone fire authorities in the UK. We protect a population of around 450,000 people, over 1,500 square miles of land. We have a workforce of 650 staff, made up from about 120 support staff, 170 whole-time firefighters and officers, and 360 on-call firefighters, this being over 23 stations. What this means to me is that our whole-time staff need to be able to be competent in a wide range of specialist skills, and our on-call staff have to be able to turn their hand to almost any task in an unsupported way for a long time before they get back up. So all our staff have to be really practical, innovative, and able to solve problems. Also, an issue is that our pool of applicants is small in some rural areas, so we can't afford to squander talent on the basis that they don't relate well to mainstream forms of assessment. I'm sure we aren't so different to many fire brigades, but these requirements led us to look differently at issues such as dyslexia. Our work started out as a way to overcome what might be considered a limiting condition, but quickly turned into a greater understanding and appreciation of what comes with having people with dyslexia in your organisation. We learnt that their experience often made them able to find new ways of solving problems, made them great team players, and showed that they had great tenacity and resilience. Our work provided more support for individuals to overcome some of the barriers they'd faced. This aided recruitment and progression, but it also helped build and demonstrate an inclusive culture to all our staff. The activity helped to very quickly remove the stigma, whether real or perceived, that comes along with dyslexia. Champions and role models popped up all over the service, and we quickly understood that the people who might have been ashamed of having dyslexia, or didn't understand why certain things had been so hard for them all their lives, were the very same people who had absolutely excelled in other aspects of their professional and personal lives. For some, a diagnosis of dyslexia made sense of everything. For us, investing in dyslexia was a win-win. The work and energy we in Shropshire Fire and Rescue Service put into supporting people with dyslexia had actually transcended the original objective to become of strategic importance. In some ways, it has become a defining characteristic of our culture, showing how much we value difference and the richness it can bring to the service. It has also allowed staff with dyslexia to willingly identify themselves without any stigma. And as the organisation has learnt more about the condition, we've come to see it as a positive attribute to have people in the workforce who are able to see things from a different perspective and often able to arrive at some very practical and pragmatic solutions. I think it's also gone beyond just being important for people with dyslexia as being important to make the organisation to be more accepting of a wide range of differences and value diversity in its fullest sense. Thank you, and I hope Natalie is able to fill in any of the blanks that I've left. It's been a pleasure to speak to you.
I'm now going to give you some more information around a little bit around our service. So as you can see, we've got 22 on-call fire stations, and these are staffed by what we call retained or part-time firefighters or on-call firefighters, 3 whole-time stations, 1 headquarters and training and development centre. So the majority of our firefighters are and the service that we provide are staffed by our on-call stations, and they're located in some of our most rural parts of the county. We rely really heavily on those members of staff. Next slide, please. I thought it would be useful to give you a breakdown because we've talked about stats today already. And in the UK, the British Dyslexia Association are estimating around 10%. But obviously, many people don't get that diagnosis throughout their whole lifetime. So in our service, people come to us sometimes thinking that they might be dyslexic, some with an assessment, but not that many. And we have firefighters in our service that have been with us 20 years, and then suddenly they think, because of the work that we've done, have come to us to get an assessment. So we'll talk to you a bit more around that. But this is to give you a feel of where we are as a service at the moment. But obviously that doesn't mean we haven't got many more people in our service that have got dyslexia. So as you can see in our operational posts, they are quite high statistics. We've got 7% in whole time and operational, and our on-call firefighters 14%. As a service as a whole, it's around 10%, but this is of the staff that we are actually aware of. And we're also aware that many of our employees who have dyslexia, they've created their own coping mechanisms. So they may not come forward to us because they don't know that they're dyslexic. So all the education that we're doing in the service is really important. Next slide, please. So I wanted to sort of tell you about our journey, really. As I said, we started off about 14 years ago with our very first employee, and we didn't really know anything about dyslexia then. So we started off really small with some visible messages, and we put posters up, we put information out, and really we're trying to educate people around what is dyslexia and what does it mean, because I think there were loads of different myths around what it meant. We thought it was really important to train our managers because people just didn't have that understanding of what dyslexia was. And they didn't understand that actually it just means that you learn differently. And, you know, there was that stigma that, you know, you're not so clever, but actually we understand now that all the skills that people with dyslexia can bring to the service. So we started that programme and we've been doing that ever since. We train all our managers on dyslexia awareness. From following from that, we created a support process. So that really is now how it's worked so well for us, that we've got a process in place of how we support our staff. And we'll go through that shortly. I think dispelling the myths and stigma has been really important in the service because it has meant that people will come forward. They're not afraid to do that anymore. Whereas before it would have been, well, I don't really want to say anything, but actually now we've got people, you know, they'll put their hands up and stand up in front of everybody and say, yes, I'm dyslexic. So it's a great cultural change in the service. Being open, so we attend information events externally, and that's great, not just for our employees, but for people that we come into encounters with. We've had children come and talk to us, and it really is brilliant to have those role models. We also created an employee dyslexia film. So lots of our dyslexic employees got involved in that film. They shared all their details of what it meant to them, the process they've been through, and lots of people had that diagnosis at different stages in their lifetime. So we've got a video, it's a bit old, but you can click on the link later on and have a look at it, but it's still really relevant to all of those people and their journey with us and to themselves. Next slide, please. So as I said, role models are so important for us, and we've got managers in the service that will say, yes, I've got dyslexia, and it's really good when we're having meetings with employees that they've got that person that they can talk to. We use social media a lot to support it. We use it all the time to make sure that if people want to share information and show that actually we've got lots of people here that are dyslexic. We have dyslexia networking events internally, and again, that's great to show support. We share information on things like what software works, what equipment do you use, what coping strategies do you have. We also in the service have green paper as standard. Now that might sound such a small thing or quite unusual, but it's such a help to people. And whilst having the reason why we have green paper is that some people have something called visual stress or Mears-Erlin. Now it's not a direct link to dyslexia. However, a lot of people who are dyslexic also have Mears-Erlin. So as an organisation, we've decided to incorporate that throughout the service. So we don't need to make anybody stand out with any special colours if they don't want to, because everybody has got that as standard now. We've also got something called Dyslexia font, and it's a font that's available to everybody to use. So if you have got lots of reading to do, and we know that that can be a real struggle for our dyslexic employees, they could change that to Dyslexia font, and it's been really helpful to have that. We also make sure that we inform our external trainers about our dyslexic employees and try to make them think around how they're presenting, what information they're giving out. You know, don't use text over pictures. There are just some really small things, but we try to make sure that they're actually being as inclusive as possible. Also recently, we've created a new voices group, and within that, we've now got a voices representative for dyslexia. So it's great that other people are taking the lead and pushing the inclusion agenda of neurodiversity in the service. Next slide, please. So our support process, just thought it'd be useful to show you that. We start off, we'll get an initial referral, we'll get somebody to do a self-assessment checklist. You can get these for free online. They're really easy to do. We'll be sending some links out for those later on. Then we would mark that as a service. And then if we felt if you were on the high end showing those traits, we would pay for full dyslexia assessment for you. And it's a really, really detailed assessment. And people don't often understand how time consuming that is. It can take 4 to 6 hours to complete that. So it's really draining for employees. We then meet with the individual employees and their line manager to discuss that assessment. There's so much information in that report, it can be quite overwhelming in itself. So I'm kind of there to guide them on what they need. Sometimes with reasonable adjustments, there can be quite a lot of things recommended for the employee. And sometimes they don't need them all, and they certainly don't need them all at once. So with the employee, we talk around what do you actually need now, what's going to help you, and then we do an implementation program of starting off perhaps one piece of software or certain pieces of reasonable adjustments that we can put in place. But we try not to overwhelm our employees because it can be quite an emotional roller coaster anyway when you have that assessment. And for a lot of people as well, it's what we call a light bulb moment where they suddenly realise, oh, this is why I find this hard, and this is why I find this difficult. And it really is good for them to understand, actually, it's not because, you know, I can't do it. It's just because I think differently than somebody else. So we put their reasonable adjustments in place, whatever they will be. Some can be really simple and easy to do. Some will be equipment, and we'll go on to show you those. And we keep that ongoing support with the employee. It might take a few months to put those in place. And we have that support really throughout their career with us. And we'll have a 6-month review to make sure everything we put in place is working. And if it's not, what can we do? So we do find that we have like peaks and troughs. So in the beginning, people might come to us when they start employment with us or when they first get their diagnosis. And then once we've got the support in place, we might not hear from them for a few years. And then they might decide to go for promotion. And when their role changes, this is when, again, they'll need support because they'll find, actually, now I'm having to write all of these reports and I'm having to read these reports and I'm finding it really difficult. So then we review what they need and then we implement more things there. Next slide, please. So reasonable adjustments, what sort of things do we put in place as a fire service? Obviously, we have lots of different types of contract in the service. So depending on their role will depend on what reasonable adjustment they'll need. But often we give them software such as Read and Write and Dragon that will help with reading out documents or changing your verbal into written for them. Things like dictaphones, such a really cheap and easy thing to give somebody, but can mean quite a lot in the fact that if they've got those memory problems, they can, you know, speak into a dictaphone, record it, or if they've got things they don't like writing down a lot of information, they can put it into the dictaphone and then relay it later. And sometimes you've got that software that can do that for you. So depending on their role in the situation, they might be able to use things like that. We also issue things like the coloured overlays, and you know, you change the colour of your screen. Again, that's linked to the MERS end. And really small things like notebooks that they can just put in their top pocket, that if they can't remember a particular process or word or spelling, they can just have it there and it's really subtle. Or a lot of people obviously use their mobile phones now. Highlighted pens to highlight text. And also one of the things we found most useful is we've got a brilliant dyslexia tutor that we use and work with us for many years. So they understand the fire service, they understand the operational role, and they understand how a dyslexic person learns. So they've been really brilliant, and they understand actually what our employees need. We also have things like one-to-one coaching as well. So that would be more local coaching that we would do on a station. So if a person might need some repetition on, for example, if it's the BA board or the writing radio messages, we would spend that time and do one-to-one coaching with them. Obviously, repetition is really key for a lot of our dyslexic employees. So we know that sometimes we need to spend that extra time with them until that kind of clicks in. We also give extra time to complete assessments if they're timed. I will say that many of our assessments at Shropshire Fire are not timed, restricted, so we don't always have to do that. But if they were doing an external course and it was a timed course, we would give them that extra time. Next slide, please. Training and development. The training and development team are such a crucial part of our dyslexic support. I can't tell you how good they are and how much they help our employees. They are often some of the people that will spot our dyslexic employees, and they will help to spot them, and then we will help to put them on their journey of finding out, because they have had the training, they understand the traits and what to look for. So they are really, really supportive. So again, extra time to complete written tests. Other things that we may not always think about what our employees will need are things like quiet space to concentrate. It might be actually you don't need lots of equipment, but you just need that, or you need time to ask questions one-to-one. We always put that in our reasonable adjustments, that our dyslexic employees may want to go and ask some more questions separately to you afterwards. Also, providing presentations and notes in advance. It's not fair to put our dyslexic employees under pressure of reading things in that environment. So we provide them in advance, they can read them in their own time, then they feel really comfortable and confident when they go into those training environments. Thinking time. So the thinking time is sometimes when we ask people questions, we expect that immediate answer. And actually, we know our dyslexic employees sometimes need that processing time. So it's making sure that in our processes, we actually think, right, we need to factor in thinking time. We need to factor in breaks in our training courses, and we're not rushing people. Again, we've got the coloured paper, which I've mentioned before. So on our training courses, if someone specified that they want a specific colour and it's not cream, pastels, it's pinks, it's blues, all pastel colours seem to work really well, then we will send it to them at home in their specific colour. One thing that we had recently was also one of our employees wanted to record some of the training sessions, and that was new for us. So we were like, yeah, we could try that out. So they recorded that training session so they can watch it again at home, and they've got that repetition that they need. And I thought that was a really good idea and something I think we'd like to look at in further detail in the future. Next slide, please. So why is it working so well for us? I think it really is around our employees and our staff. We've got brilliant training instructors, officers and managers who are really supportive. And I think having that culture where you can speak out and not be afraid and not thought of, in any particular way has actually changed the culture so much in our service. As I said there, people aren't afraid to speak out. Our employees are actually really proud. They're dyslexic, and, we're proud here of that. We've got more people coming forward all the time. They'll have a training course and people will say, yes, I'm dyslexic. And someone else will turn around and say, yes, I am too. And that culture, it doesn't happen everywhere, but it does happen for us. So it's great. There isn't any negativity. We're just really supportive. We want to get the best out of our employees. We want that inclusion. So I think that really shows. We value that diverse workforce, that when people come into us, we know that actually all of those people are bringing different skills, different ways of thinking, and it's really valuable to us. We also do a quality impact assessment. So we're trying to make sure that we assess that process to make sure that it is inclusive. So when we're creating a training test, for example, actually, is there something in that test with relation to dyslexia that does it need to be in there? And if it is, it needs to be in there for a reason. And if not, if it has a negative impact on that particular group, then we should look at removing it. And obviously for us, it's about that we keep learning. We share lots of information with other services in the UK, and we listen to other services and what they're doing as well. So I think it's really important we just keep learning, we keep listening to our employees and to the people that help us, our dyslexia tutor, our dyslexia assessor. We really do listen to what they have to tell us as well. Next slide, please. What it means to our employees is that really they're much more confident and efficient as well. Because we put all these things in place, it means that they don't have to spend as long reading that document. They say it probably takes you twice or 3 times as long to read a document if you're dyslexic, but if we put things in place that can help you, it's helping them. Also about understanding themselves and how they learn, and their family as well. I know Rachel's already mentioned earlier that she had a family member, and often that's when sometimes they will have thought, actually, I've got a family member has been diagnosed as dyslexic, and then it's a light bulb moment for them thinking, oh, I've got those similar traits as well. It also means they feel valued and motivated in the service, and they really are realising their true potential. We had an employee that hadn't been diagnosed at school. They came to us, they had their dyslexia assessment, they hadn't done educationally particularly well, and they went on to redo their education. They did their GCSEs, they got better grades, and then from that they went on to get a degree, and they went on to be trained as a paramedic. So they had an absolute sort of life change and change of direction, and to see that journey, it was so important and so valuable. And I think it's the trust in us as a service, and that we are trying to support everybody. We've got that inclusion, and we're trying all the time to make sure we've got that inclusion. And people will speak out, our employees will speak out, and I think there's some on here today. And and that's what this service is about, is that we've got that culture. Next slide, please. What's next for us then? Obviously, I mentioned neurodiversity before, and we understand and appreciate there are lots of links with dyslexia and other neurodiverse conditions. So we do support other areas as well, but it's something that I think as a service we are focusing on more other areas. We are encountering more people with things like ADHD as well, dyspraxia, autism, and we're learning all the time, because we haven't had perhaps as much experience in some of those areas, but we will keep learning. Next slide, please. That's just the end of my presentation now, and we were really proud to win those awards, especially as they were local, and not just for us, but some of our employees won awards as well, so that was really special to see that happen. I'm now going to pass over to Rachel, and she's going to tell you about some of the tools that you can use for dyslexia. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Natalie. And that's right. I'm going to share with you some of the tools that we have to support individuals with dyslexia. And first and foremost, some of the struggles that individuals with dyslexia have are involving reading, writing, spelling, sometimes math, and a little bit of communication too. So first up, when we think of individuals with dyslexia navigating education and workplace, oftentimes there is a lot of content to consume. And the one thing we can do to make it easier for individuals with dyslexia is providing them a way to consume that content that personalizes to fit their needs. So here I'm utilizing Microsoft Edge. Edge browser is another internet search engine similar to Google, but you can utilize and download Edge browser Chromium edition. And what I want to show you about that from an accessibility standpoint is, if you'll see my large mouse pointer here in purple, I'm going to go up to the right, and my bar up here, and you'll see this immersive reader icon. So I've pulled up this website, assuming that I'm an individual who's got to read through some content for my job, and perhaps I would like to use the text to speech feature. So I'm going to click on immersive reader here, and now you'll see I get this different view. This is what we call reading view, and I have the ability to go ahead and use the read aloud feature and have my text read aloud. So I'm not sure about the rest of you, but in order to be able to consume this content in an effective manner, I also need to personalize it a little bit. So let's go over here. We've got our voice options and our speed. Speed is really important because, as Natalie was mentioning, oftentimes when we have individuals with dyslexia, they process language at different speeds. And so again, that ability to choose how we're consuming and processing languages is significantly important when it comes to offering these resources, not just for individuals with dyslexia, but individuals of all abilities. So these are the first two features we have that are significantly important. Beyond that, I'm not sure about you guys, but this text is way too small for my eyesight. And so we can increase our text sizing. We can also put spacing in. And as Natalie was mentioning before, sometimes individuals with dyslexia have something that they struggle with called eye strain. And so we can change that background color to something that works best for us. In this case, I am one of those that likes the off-white type background color. I find that works best for me. In addition to that, we've got grammar tools built in. So if we wanted to have our words broken into syllables, if we wanted to highlight our parts of speech, all of these options are available to us. And then one of my favorite, or some of my favorite features here, are line focus mode. So we could choose to really focus in on just a couple lines at a time, maybe 5, 3, or even 1. Some people really prefer that. It reduces distractions. I actually prefer the full page, but also we've got picture dictionary built in. So what I really love here is that in partnership with Boardmaker, Microsoft has enabled picture dictionary, and Boardmaker makes the visual images for individuals who have speech and communication disorders. So we can go ahead, as you see, and click on a word here, and we're going to get a photograph that pops up and helps us to create meaning or comprehend that word. And then lastly, built in, we have translator. So maybe I am a non-native speaker and my language of preference is Spanish. So I could change the content here on the website to Spanish. Where did it go here? Well, let's just maybe assume it's French. And we'll click the translation button, and now we can have it translated to. So there we go. These are just some of the features that are built in to enable people when they're doing a web, searching on the internet. So this is, again, Edge browser Chromium edition. And there's your immersive reader icon up in the corner here. I'm going to turn that off. Now we're going to go to one of the other places that we can access and utilize the immersive reader technology. And this is actually where it was created. So I feel it's important for us to highlight and feature this. For those of you that use OneNote, there's both the desktop version and the online version. So the online version is free to anyone. OneNote is if you will, the digital version of a trapper keeper. So for those of you that carried those trapper keepers back in the day when we were in school that held together all of our notebooks, this is the digital version, and we can load all sorts of different content under numerous different subject areas. But if we want to create accessibility, so here's some fire training related content I've pulled into my OneNote notebook. I would go to the View tab here, and I would click on Immersive Reader. And then when I do that, I have a skin that's popped over top of the page, enabling me with that text-to-speech functionality. And here's where I can, once again, personalize how I'm consuming this content. So I change my voice speed. Maybe I don't prefer to have a male voice and find the female voice more suitable. Over here, we've got our text preferences. So again, that text sizing, our spacing, our background colors, again, grammar options and reading preferences, including picture dictionary and translator again. So again, all of these things built in at your fingertips, enabling that text-to-speech capability. Okay, so, and then if we wanted to arrow out, there we are back at our regular view. So I'm hoping everyone was hearing how the text-to-speech voice reads. It's really actually, it's amazing. We have come so far when it comes to development of these technologies. And then one last thing I want to show you before we go is our technology for writing. So individuals who struggle with dyslexia oftentimes struggle with the manual task of writing. I know I certainly did. That was why I got into those arguments with my language arts teacher. And so imagine if technology had been available to me back then, I wouldn't have had to argue. So here we have built into Microsoft Word all of these amazing tools and features to support creation of content. So firstly, I'm going to start out under our Home tab. All the way over to the right, we've got dictation. And simply, if I was to click on that, I can go ahead and dictate what it is that I've got in my head that I'd like to get onto paper, and go ahead and work around that manual task of using pencil to paper. I am a user of dictation software, period. I use dictation on a daily basis to ensure that I can quickly and effectively communicate my thoughts, period. New line. Okay, so you'll notice this was very quick, very efficient. I also had the ability to do, to use some commands like new line. You can also use things like bullets and a number of commands. But the point is that I was able to very quickly, very effectively dictate. And something to really think about here is that the software that Microsoft has created to enable us to just simply dictate is absolutely superior. I used to call myself a dictation donor because I was using technology that actually couldn't keep up with me speaking, and it had so many errors that it actually was not removing a barrier for me. It just was creating so much more work. The technology we have today is exactly as it was intended to be. So that's our dictation. And you'll notice I've also got these underlines and different things, and even while I was dictating. So over here, beside dictation, I have editor. This enables us to be able to have any of our editing done, and we can do this independently. So you'll see I've got spelling errors. If I just click on spelling, it's going to help walk me through my document. It gives me suggestions. Oftentimes when you are a dyslexic struggling with writing and spelling, sometimes you can put a word out and your spell checker will give you something back like this principle here. And it's really hard to disambiguate between which version of that word you actually meant. Well, here we've got context built in right here. And if you're fatiguing, you can have it read aloud. So once you pick the correct, the editor will continue to just walk you through the document. If you wanted to arrow out or skip something, you just click the arrow. Maybe when we want to go to our grammar, we can go ahead and go into grammar. What I like here is it also gives us some information as to why was that word flagged. And we can continue, like I said, it'll walk you through the entire document. We can go ahead and use the arrows to do that as well. So in a nutshell, these are the two features that I could highlight for you today. And there are many more. So I'll be holding trainings this summer. If you would like to take part in a full learning tools training, I'm going to go ahead and put my information into the chat and you can sign up for one of those. All right. And I think I'm handing back over to Kenneth right now.
Yes, Rachel, thank you. And Natalie and Bert, thank you very much. As we head towards the conclusion of the webinar, we'll be pausing to respond to the questions that came in through the chat. And in summarizing what we heard, Bert and Rachel sharing their personal story, Natalie sharing the experience of the Shropshire UK Fire and Rescue Services and how they turned what you heard their chief and Natalie both describe as a perceived obstacle to high performance employees. They actually discovered hidden attributes and their expectations were far exceeded and what the result of their support of identified dyslexic learners within their organization was. They began to see success on so many levels, personal, organizational, and societal, that they're made that strategic decision to continue supporting it. And lastly, Rachel demonstrated the learning tools available through Microsoft and their variety of products, and she's giving you her information for follow-on learning. Also, folks, we will be sharing with you for every attendee, we will email to you our favorite top tips for dyslexia, a brief listing of techniques and resources that have proven successful in ensuring success of all learners. And we'll also include the contact information for everyone on the call on the presenters today, as well as any links back to resources that were described during the presentation today as well. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Rick for any questions that have come in.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Appreciate the time that everyone has spent today to learn a little more about the challenge, about how departments are addressing it, and tools and resources that they can use to support their own efforts. My name is Rick Zach. I'm with Microsoft, where I lead our strategy for public safety and justice, and also served as a member of the fire service for 15 years as an officer and an instructor in Western Springs Fire Department in suburban Chicago. And so this is an issue that is a clear need that I've seen in my own service and the service and daily life of everybody on the call. And I think what was interesting was how many questions came out of different kinds from the audience. So I'm going to ask all of you. I think I have a question or two headed your way. And as Ken said, we're going to provide resources as a follow-up to this call at the end. So my first question, and I pulled this from our attendees, is actually, I'm going to give a Rachel question. Rachel, this one is for you. This came out of the chat, which was the text to read aloud. Is that considered a secure method for certification exams? And I think that question for you first. And Natalie, you probably have some insights on that as well, the accommodations and how they connect to certification exams. But Rachel, I'm going to start with you.
The technology can be used for exams. Absolutely. And it's great to be able to offer that to individuals who need it.
Same accommodation, Natalie, in the UK to use assistive technology in exams? You talked through some about more time, but is there any limitation on using some of these assistive technologies, the technology side, to supporting members for certification exams?
Yeah, I don't think we have used that so much here, but if it was an exam where they were having to do a lot of reading and writing, then I don't see why that would be a problem to introduce that. In many cases, it hasn't been a requirement, but if it all depends on that assessment, as we said earlier, really.
Okay, great,
Rick,
thank you. Oh, yes,
Rick,
please, Ken.
Could I add something? So to
Absolutely.
that question relative to certification, we reached out to the Pro Board and IFSAC, which are the two major certification and accrediting organizations for the fire service in North America. They both pointed to their established policies that say a training and certification organization can make accommodations for individuals. Those accommodations have to be based on demonstrated need from a legal standpoint and of the individual. And it is the responsibility of the testing body to have that information available if during a site visit of the accrediting bodies, they question, how did you provide for secure testing? So I think the general answer is yes, these are permissible. These techniques are permissible, but the agency would have to do its homework to ensure it complied with the requirements of the accrediting body, who will be questioning, why are you doing this and what is the legal standing for doing it?
Now that's really helpful. And in fact, that sort of sets up another question that came from the audience. It's almost that question turned inside out, which is official assessment, a diagnosis of dyslexia is not always available to firefighters. And having that done sometimes comes at cost or may not be available to a firefighter. So I would put this question broadly out. I think Natalie, you have insights, Rachel as well. Are there resources available to support that idea of a diagnosis that unlocks accommodations and everything else? And my guess is it'll be different between the countries, but we have such a broad span. Would love to hear both of your perspectives on this. Along with you, Ken, please. So Natalie first. Yeah,
I can go ahead. At Shropshire Fire, for the full dyslexia assessment, we do pay for that as a service because they're an employee and under the Equality Act in the UK, we are required to make reasonable adjustments, and we see that as part of that support process. There is government funding for some equipment and tuition once an employee has got that diagnosis. So we can apply for funding, but I would say that it only pays for a proportion of what we pay to support employees. So we do have to pay for most of that, but there are certain elements that do get paid, particularly the tuition. The only other aspect of the free element would be that on some of the national websites, so like the British Dyslexia Association website, there is a free screening tool on there for adults. So that would be your first step, but it would really give you what you need for that full assessment and that full criteria to really understand the way that you learn. So there might be some electronic intermediate kind of assessments that you might be able to get, which are cheaper and give you a bit more than just the screening tool. But obviously it is quite difficult. So you just won't get all that information that you need unless you get that full assessment. So yeah.
Rachel, what's your view on supporting people who need that diagnosis in order to sort of unlock some of those resources?
Right. Sometimes as an adult, you need the diagnosis to be able to access resources within the workplace, or even if you're taking courses at a university or otherwise. As Natalie said, there are a number of free screeners available online. You could just type that into a search engine, dyslexia screener. You also have access to a screening done by dyslexia tutors. Dyslexia tutors oftentimes will do a screening before they'll start working with you. And that is not an official diagnosis. The only person in the US here that is certified in doing, providing a diagnosis is a neuropsych who specializes in learning disabilities. And more specifically, you'd want to be very clear to, if you are seeking a diagnosis, to say learning disabilities and specifically dyslexia, to see if they're qualified. A neuropsych test is what would qualify you or categorize you in the disability of dyslexia. And you need that for specific things. Simply if you want to go, if you believe you're dyslexic and aren't asking for modifications and don't need that diagnosis for something, but you simply want to go and access tutoring, what you'd look for is an individual who's certified. And just like the BDA, the US here has a resource called the International Dyslexia Association, and that's full of resources on tutors and screenings and all sorts of things. And that'll be a resource available to you guys at post-event.
Well, and I think that's a great way to close the event out. We know that from all of your different presentations, there are many resources available. Natalie had the video shared early on. Rachel, you have so many different resources. I know, Ken, you've got resources. The thing I would add to it is there are a few questions that based on time we won't get to, but that we will share the answers to those last few questions as part of the follow-up sent to all the attendees, as well as a link to this video so they can share it with others. So Ken, thank you so much. Why don't you wrap it up for us?
Sure. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Microsoft. And to our presenters today, Dr. Clark, Natalie, and Rachel, thank you for your presentation and sharing your insights. To those who attended, thank you for your time. The one thing I would encourage you, if you do have dyslexia, you were exposed to some really great resources today, feel free to access them and do not be afraid when support is offered, whether it's in your learning, your workplace, or other, to take advantage of it. And if you are a leader of an organization, this is a great springboard for you to begin answering the question, how does my organization support dyslexic learners? And we hope that these resources will be available, will help you in answering that question. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance, and we will send you out the tip sheet. We will send you out the recording link when it's available, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue at a future point. For now, that's all.